Peace, love, and light. Peace, love, and light to you. So I'm just gonna share a little information. This is just gonna be an audio video, but it is on Thanksgiving, and I do this every year, and I like to continue to unfold the truth of these lands, because 400 years ago everything changed drastically, right? And many don't know. They don't teach us this. At least in my generation, they never taught us this. It was a whole different little fairy tale. This is from a tribal member, and here we go. So the Wampanoag Thanksgiving Stolen Land Massacred Hope. The story of a Pilgrim Thanksgiving was a fairy tale told by Lincoln to unite the Union. The Wampanoag version of the Harvest Festival with the English settlers is a day of mourning for the land taken away, a culture subverted, and people disappeared from epidemic and massacre. What really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale. When you hear about the Pilgrims and the Indians harmoniously sharing the first Thanksgiving meal in 1621, I almost said 1612, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, the Indians referred to so generically are the ancestors of the contemporary members of the Wampanoag Nation. As the story commonly goes, the Pilgrims who sailed from England on the Mayflower and landed at what became Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620 had a good harvest the next year. So Plymouth Governor William Bradford organized a feast to celebrate the harvest and invite a group of Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit, to the party. The feast lasted 3 days, and according to the chronicler Edward Winslow, Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission to prepare the feast, and the Wampanoag guests brought 5 deer to the party. And ever since then, the story goes, people in the U.S. have celebrated Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday of November. Not exactly. Romania Peters and the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Historical Preservation Officer told the Indian Country Today Media Network in a conversation on the day before Thanksgiving in 2012, 391 years since that mythological first Thanksgiving. We knew we were taught in mainstream media and in schools is made up. What's the Wampanoag version of what happened? Yeah, it was made up. It was Abraham Lincoln who used the theme of pilgrims and Indians eating happily together, and he was trying to calm things down during the Civil War when people were divided. It was like a nice unity story. So it was a political thing. Yes, it was a political relations. It was kind of genius, diabolically brilliant. It kind of genius in a way to get people to sit down and eat dinner together. Families were divided during the Civil War. Question, so what really happened? We made a treaty. The leader of our nation at the time, Yellow Feather Massasoit, no kidding, a treaty with John Carver, the first governor of the colony. They elected an official while they were still on the boat. They had their charter. They were still under the jurisdiction of the King of England, at least that's what they told us. So they couldn't make a treaty for a boatload of people, so they made a treaty between 2 nations, England and the Wampanoag Nation. And what did the treaty say? It basically said we'd let them be there, and we would protect them against any enemies, and they would protect us from any of ours. In 2011, Native American copy coin commemorates the 1621 treaty between the Wampanoag tribes and the Pilgrims of Plymouth County. It was basically, I'll watch your back, you watch mine agreement. Later on, we collaborated on jurisdictions and creating systems so that we could live together. Why do you call the Indians fools? Because they should have let the Pilgrims starve. The Indians were thanked. Their land was stolen from them. They were massacred, and many lived out their lives in slavery. The consequence is that less than 1% of Americans have Native American blood, contrasted to the 90% of Mexican Americans with indigenous blood. What's the Mashpee version of 1621 meal? You've probably heard the story of how Squanto assisted in their planting of corn, so this was their first successful harvest, and they were celebrating that harvest and planning a day of their own Thanksgiving. And it's kind of like what some of the Arab nations do when they celebrate by shooting guns in the air. So this was what was going on there at Plymouth. They were shooting guns and cannons as a celebration, which alerted us because we didn't know what they were shooting at. So Massasoit gathered up some 90 warriors and showed up at Plymouth prepared to engage. If that was what was happening, if they were taking any of our people, they didn't know. It was a fact-finding mission. When they arrived, it was explained through a translator that they were celebrating the harvest, so we decided to stay and make sure that was true. Because we'd seen the other landings. Captain John Smith, even the Vikings had been here, so we had wanted to make sure we decided to camp nearby for a few days. During those few days, the men went out to hunt and gather food, deer, ducks, geese, and fish. There are 90 men here, and at the time, I think there were only 23, there's that number, survivors of that boat, the Mayflower. So you can imagine the fear. You have armed natives who are camping nearby. The colonists were always vulnerable to the new land, new creatures, even the trees. There were no such trees in England at the time. People forget that they had just landed here, and the coastline looked very different from what it looks like now. Their culture, new foods, they were afraid to eat a lot of things, so they were very vulnerable, and we did protect them. Not just support them, we protected them. You can see through their journals that they were always nervous, and unfortunately, when they were nervous, they were very aggressive. King Philip, Metacombe, 1637 to 1676, before launching King Philip's War on the inhabitants of New England. The English who came first to this country were but a handful of people, forlorn, poor, and distressed. My father, Massasoit, did all in his power to serve them. Others came. Their numbers increased. My father's counselors urged him to destroy the English before they become strong enough to give law to the Indians and take away their country. My father was also the father of the English. He remained their friend. Experience shows that his counselors were right. The English disarmed many people. They tried them by their own laws, assessed damages my people could not pay. Sometimes the cattle of the English would come into the cornfields of my people, for they did not make fences like the English. I must then be seized and confined till I sold another tract of my contract for damages and costs. Thus tract after tract is gone. But a small part of the dominion of my ancestors remains. I am determined not to live until I have no country. King Philip, from Norman B. Wood, lives a famous Indian chiefs, Aurora's, Illinois, American Indian Historical Published Company, 1906, revised in 94-95. So the story of the indigenous voices of the Northeast, past, present, and future. So the Pilgrims didn't invite the Wampanoag to sit down and eat turkey and drink some beer. Laughs, no, well, let's put it this way. People didn't eat together, but not in what was portrayed the first Thanksgiving. It was our homeland and our territory, and we walked all through their villages all the time. The difference is how they behaved, how they ate, how they prepared things. Was a lot of both cultures to work with each other. But in those days, it was sort of like today when you go on a boat in the open sea and you see another boat and everyone is waving very friendly. It's because they're vulnerable and need to rely on each other if something happens. In those days, the English really needed to rely on us. Yes, they were polite at best, as best as they could be, but they regarded us as savages nonetheless. So you did eat together sometimes, but not as a legendary Thanksgiving meal. No, we were there for days, and this is the other thing. We gave thanks more than once a year in formal ceremonies for different seasons, for the green corn Thanksgiving, for the arrival of certain fish species, whales, the first snow, our new year in May. One more time, our new year in May. There are so many ceremonies, and I think most cultures have similar traditions. It's not a foreign concept, and I think human beings who recognize greater spirit, then they would have to say thank you in some formal way. What are Mashpee Wampanoag taught about Thanksgiving now? Most of us are taught about the friendly Indians and the friendly pilgrims and people sitting down and eating together. They really don't go into any depth about that time period and was going on in 1620. It was a whole different mindset. There was always focus on food because people had to work hard to go out and forage for their food, not the way it is now. I can remember being in Oklahoma amongst a lot of different tribal people when I was just a junior in college, and Thanksgiving was coming around and I couldn't come home. And it was too far and too expensive, and people were talking about Thanksgiving and, yeah, the Indians. And I said, yeah, we're the Wampanoags. They didn't know. We're not even taught what kind of Indians. One more time, they weren't even taught what kind of Indians. Hopefully in the future, at least for Americans, we do need to get a lot brighter about other people. So basically today the Wampanoags celebrate Thanksgiving the way the Americans celebrate it, or celebrate it as Americans, ? Yes, but there's another element to this that needs to be noted as well. The Puritans, who believed in Jehovah, and they were listening for Jehovah's direction on a daily basis, was trying to figure out what would please their God. So for Americans, for the most part, there's a Christian element to Thanksgiving. So formal prayer, and some families will go around the table and ask what you are thankful for this year. In Mashpee families, we make offerings of tobacco. For traditionalists, we give thanks to our first mother, our human mother, and to Mother Earth. Then, because there's no real time to it, you embrace your thanks in passing them into the tobacco without necessarily speaking aloud. But to actually give your mind and spirit together, thankful for so many things. Unfortunately, because we're trapped in this cash economy in the 9-to-5 schedule, we can't spend the normal amount of time in ceremonies which would last 4 days for the proper Thanksgiving. Do you regard Thanksgiving as a positive thing? As a concept, a heartfelt Thanksgiving is very important to me as a person. It's important that we give thanks. For me, it's a state of being. You want to live in a state of thanksgiving, meaning that you use the creativity that the Creator gave you. You use your talents. You find out what those are around you and cultivate them and give thanks in that action. And will your family do something for Thanksgiving? Yes, we'll do the rounds and make sure we contact family members, eat with friends, and then we'll all celebrate on Saturday at the social and dance together with the drum. So I just thought this was very important to share more truth about Thanksgiving. In that it's a fairy tale what they tell you in school, what they teach us, what they teach our children. And it's important that these tribes are honored. The Wampanoag. One more time, that the Wampanoag tribes are honored. For these are their lands. And they suffered great sacrifice to the white paleface. And this isn't a prejudice thing. They were palefaces. They were foreigners on their land and stole their land. I'm not here to make anyone feel bad if you celebrate Thanksgiving. This is not what this is about. This is about sharing the truth and honoring the tribes and holding space of love, compassion, and forgiveness. For forgiveness is key. For these greedy folk did not, for greed got them. They believed in Jehovah. Jehovah is a fallen God, if you will, lower G God. They are the fallen angelic race. That's who they believe. And it's interesting because the pilgrims fled over here because they did not want to go with things they were forced to be doing over in England. So they fled to this new land to get away from that, and then they just recycled it all over here again with the crown money, Jehovian money, which is reptilian money, if any of you understand all that, with the English and the Queen and so on and so forth. So this is facts, ladies and gentlemen. The truth is the truth. The truth will always come out. And it's important we honor and respect. To them, it's a day of mourning. And they give thanks and they remember those who were sacrificed. This was the most horrific massacre on these lands thus far. Peace, love, and light.